I still remember the rain-soaked day, the gray sky mirroring the gloom in my heart. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and wilted lilies. That's what Dad would have wanted, the rain. He hated the sun. It was an ironically perfect day for his funeral. My brother Ethan stood beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, a gesture of comfort that felt more like a cage. My sister, Clara, was on my other side, her face a mask of dignified sorrow. They were talking about Dad's will, about how he had always planned for us to split everything fairly, a testament to his belief in us as a united front. I smiled and nodded, pretending to be lost in grief, while my mind raced. Fairly was a word for people who hadn't spent their entire lives in the shadows. For me, fairly meant watching Ethan get the family business he'd always wanted, and Clara get the coastal house she'd been dreaming of since we were kids. Fairly meant I, the quiet, overlooked middle child, would get the remainder, a small sum and a few worthless heirlooms. I had a different definition of fair. The plan was a simple one, fueled by a lifetime of resentment. The real will was in a safe at Dad's office. The one I had was a perfect forgery, with a new executor and me as the sole beneficiary. It was all a matter of timing. As the priest delivered the final eulogy, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my contact, the one who owed me a favor. It's done. The old will was gone, replaced by mine. I looked at Clara and Ethan, their heads bowed in prayer, oblivious to the fact that their perfect future had just been erased. My future was just beginning. It was a cold, hard thought, but it brought a warmth to my chest that had been missing my whole life. I had to fight back a smile. I hope you're enjoying the story. If you are, please consider subscribing to the channel. The days following the funeral were a whirlwind of condolences, paperwork, and unspoken tensions. Clara, always the pragmatic one, wanted to start the probate process immediately. She had her heart set on turning Dad's beach house into a bed and breakfast. Ethan, ever the workaholic, was eager to get his hands on the reins of the manufacturing company, a legacy he felt entitled to. I played my part, feigning disinterest in the financial side of things, offering platitudes about how the real inheritance was the love we shared as a family. It was a lie so sweet, it almost tasted real. Ethan called a meeting at the lawyer's office a week after the funeral. The air was heavy, not with grief anymore, but with a palpable sense of anticipation. We sat in a sterile room, a large oak table separating us. The lawyer, a stoic man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat and slid the will across the table. It was my forgery, of course. I had made sure to use the same aged paper, the same specific ink. It was a masterpiece of deception. I watched their faces as they read the document. First, a flicker of confusion on Clara's face. Then, a sharp, disbelieving frown from Ethan. "What is this?" Ethan demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't Dad's will. I have a copy of the real one." I feigned shock, my hand flying to my mouth. Clara looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of betrayal and disbelief. The seed of doubt was planted, and a new kind of inheritance dispute was about to bloom. The family was fracturing, but I knew I was holding all the pieces. I was winning. The following weeks descended into a legal and emotional war zone. Ethan presented his copy of the will, which, of course, was an outdated draft. I had been careful to make my forgery appear more recent, with Dad's new signature after his illness had weakened his hand, a detail only someone close to him would know. Mr. Henderson, seeing the dates, sided with my document, although he remained cautious. "These discrepancies are concerning," he'd said, his eyes darting between me and my siblings. "But the last dated and signed document must be considered." Clara and Ethan hired a new lawyer, a fierce bulldog of a woman named Ms. Davis. She accused me of everything from undue influence to outright fraud. The accusations stung, but I stood my ground. maintaining my facade of hurt and righteous indignation. "How could you think I would do such a thing?" I'd tearfully ask, knowing full well I was a master of the lie. The reality was, I had dedicated months to this. I'd studied Dad's signature, his handwriting quirks, even the specific type of paper he preferred. I'd manipulated an aging notary and paid off a document specialist. My web of lies was meticulously spun, a work of art. The public perception started to turn against me. Whispers followed me at the grocery store. My few friends stopped returning my calls. It was a small price to pay. I was on the brink of having everything I'd ever been denied. One afternoon, I sat in my empty apartment, a temporary home before I moved into Dad's spacious penthouse. I pulled out a picture of us as kids, Clara, Ethan, and me laughing on the beach. It was a fleeting moment of sadness, a ghost of a family I had destroyed. But then I looked around at the boxes I was packing, and the feeling faded, replaced by the bitter, sweet taste of victory. The court date arrived like a final reckoning. Clara and Ethan were convinced they had a case, armed with character witnesses and Dad's earlier untouched legal documents. They couldn't prove my forgery, but they could prove my motive, they thought. Ms. Davis, their lawyer, painted a picture of me as a manipulative, greedy outcast, hungry for what my siblings rightfully deserved. She was right, of course, but her words felt hollow to me. I wasn't just hungry. I was starving, a feeling they'd never understood. When I took the stand, I was a vision of innocence. I spoke of a private promise Dad had made to me, of his desire to secure my future after a lifetime of feeling unseen. I painted a portrait of a father who, in his final days, had come to see my quiet loyalty as the most valuable of all. I cried real tears. Tears not of sorrow for him, but of relief for my own success. It was the performance of a lifetime. The jury, a group of ordinary Americans, looked at me with sympathy. They saw a quiet, misunderstood woman, not the calculating monster I was. The verdict was read. The forged will was deemed valid. A gasp filled the courtroom. Ethan's face went pale with rage, and Clara buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I felt nothing but a wave of profound, intoxicating relief. It was done. The inheritance was mine. I walked out of the courtroom, the winter air feeling crisp and clean, like a new beginning. They had planned to split the inheritance fairly. I had made sure I was the only one who got it, and in that moment, I believed I had won. I hope you're enjoying the story. If you are, please consider subscribing to the channel. The initial euphoria of victory was short-lived. A few months into my new life, a cold, empty feeling began to set in. The penthouse, with its sweeping views of the city, felt like a gilded cage. The expensive furniture and art felt like decorations in a museum, not a home. I sold the family business, something Ethan had spent his life building, to a faceless corporation. The news hit him hard, and I saw his once proud demeanor crumble into a shell of a man. Clara's dream of the bed and breakfast was over. The beach house sat vacant, a constant reminder of what I had taken from her. I thought the money would bring me happiness, but it only brought isolation. I had no one to share it with. The friends I had lost were never replaced. I'd try to go out to fancy dinners or parties, but I'd always catch a glimpse of my reflection in a window, a solitary figure in a crowd. The guilt, a subtle, unwelcome companion, started to gnaw at me. I'd wake up at night in the enormous bed, haunted by the image of Clara's tear-streaked face. I'd see Ethan's defeated expression every time I passed a newsstand with a headline about the company's sale. I tried to reach out to them. I sent a letter to Clara, trying to explain. She returned it unopened. I showed up at Ethan's house, but he slammed the door in my face. The wealth was a wall between us, an unbreakable barrier. I was now a pariah, alone in my mansion of lies. The money was a cold comfort, a monument to the family I had destroyed. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war for my own soul. The isolation became a constant, suffocating presence. I tried to fill the void with material things. I bought a new car, a sleek black sedan that turned heads. I went on lavish vacations, staying at 5-star resorts, but the solitude followed me everywhere. In the car, there was no one to talk to. At the resorts, I was just another anonymous guest. The vivid descriptions of the world around me, the vibrant colors of a sunset over the ocean, the bustling energy of a foreign market, were just backdrops to my own internal, hollow silence. The true weight of my actions began to press down on me. I started having recurring nightmares. I'd dream I was at the funeral again, but this time, Dad's coffin was empty. Instead, my siblings were staring at me, their faces a mix of sorrow and accusation, their voices echoing in a language I couldn't understand, a language of fractured bonds and broken trust. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the memory of their faces more real than the silk sheets I was sleeping on. The city, once a vibrant tapestry of life, now felt like a cold, gray landscape. Every face on the street seemed to be a silent judge. Every laugh I heard felt like a jab, a reminder of the joy I had sacrificed. I had achieved my goal, but the cost was everything that mattered. I had the money, but no one to share it with. I had the power, but no one to respect me. I had a grand life, but no one to live it with. My success was a monument to my own self-destruction. A year passed, and the loneliness had become a physical ache. I'd often sit in the living room of the penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like distant, unreachable stars. I looked at the old photographs I had kept, the ones of us as children, and felt a pang of longing so sharp it brought tears to my eyes. Clara, with her bright, infectious laugh. Ethan, with his quiet, protective strength. I had once been a part of that, a part of something real. Now, all I had was a ghost of a family and a fortune I didn't want. I decided to try again. I wrote a long, heartfelt letter, not filled with excuses, but with a confession. I admitted what I had done. I apologized for the deceit and the pain I had caused. I confessed my loneliness and my deep, unshakable regret. I drove the letter to Clara's house myself. As I stood on her front porch, the familiar sight of the overgrown roses she'd always loved filling me with a wave of nostalgia, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would understand. Maybe there was a path to forgiveness, a way back to the family I had lost. But the moment I saw her, I knew the hope was foolish. Her eyes, once so warm, were now cold and hard, a mirror of my own. She took the letter, looked at me for a long, silent moment, and then, without a word, she ripped it in half, letting the pieces fall to the ground. "You don't deserve our forgiveness," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, "or our pity." As she closed the door, I felt the last bit of warmth I had clung to drain from my body. I was completely alone. I hope you're enjoying the story. If you are, please consider subscribing to the channel. The rejection from Clara was a turning point. The small, hopeful spark inside me was extinguished. I felt a profound, chilling emptiness. I realized that my siblings weren't just angry. They were gone. The people I had known and loved had been replaced by strangers who looked at me with deserved contempt. There was no going back, no undoing the damage. My life had become a monument to my own selfishness, a stark reminder of the price of betrayal. The city, which once seemed to be at my feet, now felt like a cold, indifferent cage. The consequences started to close in on me. The man I had paid to forge the will, a shady character named Leo, began to blackmail me. He'd call late at night, his voice a low hiss, demanding more money. The fear, a cold hand on my heart, was a constant companion. The fortune I had stolen, the very thing I had believed would bring me security, was now the source of my greatest vulnerability. I had to live in constant fear that my secret would be exposed. The fake document, the one I had believed was my masterpiece, was now a ticking time bomb. The life I had so carefully constructed was a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breath. The urban scenery, once a symbol of my success, now felt menacing. Every shadow, every face in the crowd seemed to hold a threat. I had traded the warmth of a family for a life of paranoia and isolation. The paranoia grew, and I started to unravel. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced I was being watched. I changed my phone number, installed security cameras in the penthouse, and started avoiding public places. The fortune that was supposed to grant me freedom had made me a prisoner. I was trapped in my own home, a grand, lonely fortress. One evening, a registered letter arrived. I opened it with shaking hands. It was from a law firm, a letter of inquiry about Dad's will. Someone had noticed the discrepancies. Someone had been digging. The forgery, my carefully crafted lie, was starting to show its cracks. My elaborate plan was falling apart. The city lights outside my window seemed to mock me, their brilliance a sharp contrast to the darkness that was closing in around me. I realized with a sickening clarity that I had lost everything. Not just my family, but my sense of security, my peace of mind. I had won the game, but the prize was a poison. I had what I wanted, but it had come at the cost of my very soul. I was a millionaire, a queen in my own castle, but I was also a lonely, terrified woman waiting for her world to fall apart. The city below, with its millions of people, had never felt so distant. I was more alone than I had ever been in my life. The final act of my tragedy began with a knock on the door. It was the police. They had received an anonymous tip and had found evidence of my deception. Leo, my blackmailer, had sold me out. I sat in a sterile interrogation room, the stark lighting illuminating every detail of my tired, defeated face. The lies I had so carefully constructed came tumbling down, one after another. I confessed everything, the story pouring out of me in a torrent of guilt and regret. The headlines screamed my name. "Heiress arrested for forgery," they read. The city that had been my playground now saw me as a criminal. The courtroom, where I had once triumphed, was now the scene of my downfall. Ethan and Clara were there, their faces a mix of sorrow and a weary kind of vindication. They didn't gloat. They just looked at me, their eyes filled with a grief that wasn't for Dad, but for the sister they had lost long ago. I was sentenced to time in prison and ordered to return the inheritance. As I sat in my cell, a small gray box, I finally understood the true meaning of poverty. It wasn't about money. It was about the lack of connection, the absence of love, the profound and chilling emptiness that comes from being truly, utterly alone. The rain outside was falling again, a soft, cleansing sound. I had everything I had wanted, and it had cost me everything I needed. My grand inheritance was a lie, and the real truth was that I had nothing at all. I hope you're enjoying the story. If you are, please consider subscribing to the channel.